We have to start hiring more minorities so we have that opportunity.
More minorities need to start applying for the job.
Well, the thing is this, though. The reality is we have had a number of situations.
Trying to recruit black folks, and black people don't want to be cops.
In part one of this conversation between police officers, we asked cops from around the country to confront the bad apple narrative, whether or not law enforcement has a problem with institutional racism, and how cops feel about the calls to defund the police. In part two of this conversation, you will hear these same police officers discuss the effects of quotas within policing, their personal experiences with witnessing excessive force being used by colleagues, and if racism has motivated the disproportionate killing of black men by the police. For the group, by a show of hands, who here has personally seen excessive force used on the job?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Almost everyone. So keep your hand raised if you did something in that moment.
You're throwing that to me, Lee?
Interesting. Well, so what I wanted to throw to you, Joe, was if you think that police agencies have an excessive force issue. Almost everyone here has witnessed an instance of that. I'm just curious if that's a systemic issue within policing.
Well, I wouldn't say it's systemic, but when I have seen it, I interceded. I calmed the officer down, pulled him off, and took him out of the scene. Because that's our jobs. When I was training, I trained cops for 29 of my 31 years. I opened up all my training, regardless if it was unarmed combat, firearms, everything, is that I told the officers, if you're backing up an officer, you are their best friend, because we're human beings. Police officers are human beings. And when people are assaulting them, sometimes they get a little too much. And it's up to the officer assisting to pull them out of that situation. In Minneapolis, had those officers done that for that officer, we may not be here today, to be honest. They just didn't do their jobs. There are 3 officers there that could have pulled him off of that. And that's what should have happened there. Period. There's no getting around that. There's no arguing with that. Every officer probably on this panel understands that, or they probably wouldn't be on this panel. But you have to intercede. Sometimes it doesn't happen that often, really, to be honest, but it can. Officers are humans, and they can get into difficult situations where they might lose a little control, and what they're about to do would be excessive. In Minneapolis, I had to turn down a case where a Minneapolis officer did something, and I said, I can't defend that.
For raised our hand, right, who have seen it and who interceded in those moments. I'm curious if you could just walk me through, if you don't mind sharing, what you saw, what your thought process was like, and then how you moved through that moment, how you navigated it.
Well, and I just real quick to piggyback off of what Louis just said, the research tells us that female police officers have much lower incidence of excessive force, uses of deadly force, and they're more effective in responding to things like domestic violence and sexual assault, but only 12% of American police officers are women. And we are woefully underrepresented in policing and in police leadership. So in my personal experiences, I had a number of occasions as a younger officer where force was used, and then, when the supervisor responded to the scene, I told the supervisor what had happened, and the officer who used that force denied their actions or underplayed them, and the supervisor failed to follow up on that investigation. As a sergeant, I had a couple of occasions where I had to physically pull my officers back in situations to prevent them from going overboard. And it is true that I think there are a lot of situations where emotions play into it, and there's adrenaline, and it's very difficult to control those in some cases. And I had one in particular where myself and my male partner responded to an elderly woman who had been assaulted, and her arm was broken. And so when my partner went to engage the suspect, he was very upset. And he was very unable to control himself in that situation.
But we are trained professionals. So those incidences should be outliers and not something that regularly happens. But the other issue is that we have to address is when we have officers that call their Internal Affairs Bureau and they talk and they report problematic behavior, in some cases that could be regular use of excessive force on individuals, and they tell their Internal Affairs Bureaus that this is happening. Traditionally, what I have seen and experienced along with many others is that the department, in trying to protect its reputation, does everything possible to use its resources to discredit the whistleblower and not address the issue that the whistleblower is bringing to their attention. So it ingrains a situation where bad actors are protected by the department because protecting them protects the department's reputation up until the point where their actions escalate to the point where you have somebody killed and it becomes a public situation. And that's what we're seeing now from so many years of not taking these calls from whistleblowers seriously.
I think that, I'm sorry, Matt, you were going to say
I was going to say, how about we have a show of hands of who's had force used against them unnecessarily as a citizen growing up? Like, it's a reality. It's something I experienced. So right off the jump from when I got this job, I mean, I'm a professional peacemaker. I just made it clear, like, and you guys pull this tune-up nonsense or they're doing extra nonsense on an arrest, I'm going to be the first one to tell on you. I made that very, very clear because I know what it feels like. And I just said I would never be like that. And as far as the emotion into making an arrest, I've been in a gazillion fights and all kind of dangerous chases and situations. I'm a professional peacemaker. That's what makes you a professional, that you can control those emotions. That's what we do. That's the standard you should be held to. I don't buy the excuse, oh, I was amped up and therefore I had to hit this guy or I had to do anything extra. You cuff him, you do what you need to do to cuff him, and then that's it. You're pro.
I just want to respond real quick. I just want to push back just a little bit on the race relations and sex relations to hiring individuals. I really did not like to hear that there is some type of a better adjustment to the police department because a person is Black in leadership. I mean, I think we need to talk through that a little bit because it just sounds racist to me. And also the sex aspect of it. All of the female police officers that I've dealt with have been the worst police officers. Now, there are some female police officers that are extremely professional, but they are the upper echelon. Some of these other female police officers, you can't go to a call where there's going to be some force used, or they're going to sit over there and you're going to have to fight all by yourself. That's my personal experience. So I don't like the fact that people saying, well, females are this way or Black officers are this way. I think we need to look down the middle and say, you either have it or you don't have it. You either are a leader with integrity. I don't care if you're white or Black or green, or you're an officer with integrity. I don't care if you're a male or a female, because I think these numbers get skewed because you put a Black police chief in place of an operating police department that's solid. I mean, how do you get those statistics? And now you are a positive statistic. Some of these females that I work with, they didn't have a lot of uses of force or any excessive use of force because they didn't use force. I mean, they would talk and get beat up, and then I would have to come and have to cover their butt. So not saying that that's all police officers. I highly doubt that Wendy is one of those officers. But I don't think that it's fair to just go off of sex or race. I think we need to look at individual officers.
I mean, listen, the reality
is that
right quick?
Yeah, that's realistic, though, man. You can't get mad at realism, bro. That's real, though.
To say female officers are somehow using less force. I've been on a police star with female officers. A lot of them are not able to fight back when you have suspects who are legit. I've been there. I've seen it. They get thrown around like rag dolls, and it takes men to come to the scene and use force. There was a few women who were bad to the bone. I'm not gonna lie. They'll fight with you, but there's a lot of females that they'll do the talking, but they're not gonna do no fighting, and you'll get killed messing with some of them. So I don't think it's fair to.
Yeah,
I do have to rebut.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I disagree. I have to say, listen, the reality is this, and the numbers don't lie. 90% of the police chiefs and police commissioners in this country are white men, largely, right? When we look at African-American police chiefs and police commissioners nationally, 4% is what represent those departments. And for Hispanics, it's 3%. We are not represented in the leadership, largely because we are not given the opportunity by the system to take on these responsibilities.
And
it's not that we can't do that.
Let me say this real quick. When I was in the academy, I had a white officer. He had already did like 20-something years, but he had transferred to Arizona and he came back to Ohio. So he had to go through like a small little Okada course. I never forget his words to me. He said, Dave, I love your enthusiasm. You're going to be an amazing person, period, with or without the uniform. He said, but notice, you're entering a white man's field of work. This is what a white man told me this. I didn't know what he was saying at the time until I got into the field. You know how many jobs and turned me down because because he got a little bit of a pass, his driving record ain't the best. Yep. Man, you know how many opportunities I done lost, man? So I agree with what Mr. Molina said because, man, I done scratched and clawed. When I tell y'all what I'm about to tell y'all, y'all not gonna feel me. But I am one of the few that slipped through the cracks. And what I mean by that is that I shouldn't have been a cop. I don't even know how I made it. That guy was just looking out for me. I'm supposed to be here. You get what I'm saying? But I'm telling y'all, it ain't nothing gonna change until the people who are up top retire, move on, and people with a better mindset take that seat.
But that's not
what?
white.
Let me say this, Brandon.
It doesn't have nothing to do with being white. It has something to do with bad leadership. And I'll say this. I was a black police officer on a majority white and Hispanic police department. I was on a SWAT team. I was the spokesperson for the police department. So, I mean, people may have different experiences, but my personal experience is that it's not about black and white. Use your doggone talent. You pursue excellence.
You ain't got no talent.
But color does have something to do with it because as human beings, and I love everybody, but if I go to a bar and it's full of white people, and I see at the bar there's like 3 black people sitting out at the edge of the bar, just automatically I'm going to gravitate towards people who look like me. And the same thing in the community. You are way more comfortable with people who look like you because you automatically assume that you share life, things similar in life. You're like, oh, this person may have grown up like me. They look like me. That's just human nature. Mm-hmm. So if you have a black police chief in a predominantly black community, they're going to be a lot more comfortable with the police that they have because they look like you, and that's just facts. I'm not saying that
they do a lot of killing and they still do a lot of crime.
I agree, but I'm just saying we're just more comfortable with people who look like us. And that's just a fact.
I agree with that. But what I'm saying is that when you're going through the methodical sense of hiring police chiefs, hire the best person for the job. This race stuff is going to just make us worse. A
lot of us don't get the opportunity to because there are a lot of us. Our hiring pool is way smaller. The hiring pool for black chiefs, black lieutenants, black captains, black sergeants is going to be smaller. And same thing with
that are black that are on the police department.
And this is what Louis is saying. This is what David is saying. Yeah. We have to start hiring more minorities so we have that opportunity.
More minorities need to start applying for the job.
Well, the thing is this, though. The reality is we have had a number of situations
trying to recruit black folks, and black people don't want to be cops.
It's beyond that. We have had situations where we have had minority, African-American, Latino women candidates for police chief and police commissioner jobs. And despite all their experiences, despite all their academic degrees, which to some had doctorates, and they were passed over by a male white with a high school diploma. And I'm not trying to be an elitist, but you can't explain that.
What about the whites that are passed over? What about the white people who are passed over that are equally qualified and they get passed up by other whites?
There ain't that many of them.
No.
So somebody, the high school diploma guy got a job over other whites and blacks who probably had degrees.
Let Lee talk. Go ahead.
I hear from Wendy to weigh in here. I know, obviously, regarding female officers and your experience, I'd just like to hear your response.
Well, I think what we're hearing here is part of the problem. Less than 1% of all police encounters and arrests involve even a need to use force. And so when we prioritize these masculine traits and the ability to fight in doing this job and ignore the fact that over 99% of the job is about communication, then we're creating a culture where what's valued is this need to fight people. And in 21 years, I I had my share of fights and physical encounters, but a lot of them were because, a partner or another police officer, usually a male, escalated the situation. And then it led to a use of force that maybe didn't have to happen. So I think, dialing it back, if we pay attention to the research and the actual work that police officers do, and
fuck the research. Let's talk about facts and what's really going on, man. No offense, Wendy. I'm just being honest, man.
David, what's on your mind?
Like, man, man, listen, Aaron, I love his mindset. Luis, I love your mindset. Brandon, you making some great points because you just said something before you got cut off that not enough minorities are applying. They basically saying, fuck 12, fuck the police. You're absolutely correct. But for those who actually do try to take on the opportunity, we don't get it. When you speak about women, Wendy, let me tell you, I can only speak about my area. Women can't even pass the push-ups to get into the academy. Let's talk about that real quick. I would love to have a female officer. I've only worked with maybe 3 my entire career. All right. They wasn't high-headed. They could hold their own. I had one woman officer when I approached the door. A dog came running to the door and she took off. Was I upset about it? Yeah, I was upset because I would have had to fight this pit bull by myself. But I understood that, okay, where she may be weak, I got to be strong. All right. If I got to pick up the slack here and there, cool. If it's become a problem, then I'll type on it. That's different. But let's not act like, and let's not basically look past the fact that minorities, whether you Asian, whether you Black, whether whatever your nationality is, you are looked past. And yes, you are right, Brandon. There are some white people that are looked past as well, but we are completely outnumbered. I can name 5 suburbs right off the top of my head that don't even have a Black cop, but they getting paid $87,000 a year, starting walking through the door as a rookie.
Let me shift the gaze just slightly and ask you guys this, right? David, I'm sorry to be another person to bring up a study, but in a 2019 one pointed out that with data collected from 2013 to 2018, that Black men were about 2.5 times more likely to be shot and killed by a police officer than their white counterparts. Does law enforcement have an issue with racism?
I don't believe so. I don't think they have an issue with racism. Let me explain this too. I think people are forgetting the number of criminal behavior that's being interjected in these minority communities. African American people make up about 13% of the population. African American people, based on statistics, commit almost half of the murders in this country. That's why police are necessitated in these areas, and that's why they have more police interactions. When you look at police interactions, and I don't want to spend too much time explaining this, I'll pass it to somebody else, but just based on what I said, I don't think that there's racism on the police department or systemic racism against Blacks.
So I will tell you, Oh, go ahead, Louis.
I'll answer that this way, right? Because there's a lot of talk about there's significant police encounters. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt that from the police officer's perspective, they believe that this individual has committed a crime or is about to commit a crime. But to be quite frank, when we take the NYPD, for example, from 2004 to 2012, they stopped over 4.4 million people under their Stop, Question, and Frisk program, of which 50% of the population in New York City is either Black or brown, but they were over 80% of the people stopped. And of that group, 90% were not given a summons and they were not arrested, right? There was no objective reason to them being stopped. So the significant number of encounters that Black and brown communities have with police doesn't only stem from crime, it stems from an arrest quota system, an arrest summons system. And that's what perpetuates policing careers and has perpetuated for a long time now.
CompStat is evil.
Yeah, so the police department through its system, right, and has this sort of indirect profiling mechanism that's driven by summons and arrest quotas that exists within the police department. And that has to be owned by the leadership of the department.
Stats are, I'm gonna tell you, most encounters, if in my opinion, that come and affect minorities are because of CompStat. Stats. You want stats. They say you don't have a quota, but everybody on this panel knows when it comes towards the end of the month, if you don't have a certain area of stats, you know, you're going to hear something from your supervisor, and it affects you getting promoted. It affects your performance evaluations. And you see these guys like, okay, how many alcohol summonses do you have? Guess what? At the end of the month, you're going to go write alcohol summonses. Where are you going to go write these alcohol summonses at? At these liquor stores in mostly poor minority communities. And you're going to write a guy a summons who doesn't have a car. He's standing out there drinking out of a bag. He doesn't have a car. He ain't going to show up to court. Now you got a warrant for him of a guy who he's going to go through the system, and he can't even afford a car or transportation to court, but you're going to expect him to pay for legal fees? Like, well, it's a bad circle, man.
I think you hit a good point. The dude is committing a crime. So
absolutely.
What I'm saying is that the police departments may be going into these areas because it's rich with criminal behavior. I just personally believe, and based on what I've seen, that it's less to do with race and more to do with social economic situations and people who are perpetuating crime. Let me not.
It's actually it's definitely a class thing. It's definitely
I think it's both. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think it's both, but I don't believe that we should criminalize alcoholism. We don't have on-demand mental health and physical health care in this country, but we have on-demand policing. So when we make the police the solution to a guy drinking a beer on the street, we are criminalizing alcohol dependency.
I agree with that. We need to manage the criminalization of some of these things, but at the end of the day, man, when are we going to talk about accountability? The reason why we all on this panel, and I'm not going to go to jail or get killed by anybody, because I'm not going to commit crimes. In this whole
I think you can also be conditioned. You know, if scenario-based training isn't fair, right? You know, I remember going to the police academy. And in most of the scenario-based training, the person who would have been the perpetrator was dressed in urban streetwear, right? Which is very normal to me. But if you're a kid who grew up in a suburban neighborhood where you weren't really exposed to that, and now you're training to become an inner city police officer, and you're conditioned to believe that urban dressed individuals, mostly people of color, is a dangerous signal, then you're going to have a heightened sense of awareness when you have these interactions with people from the inner city community. So I think training also plays into this part of conditioning what we label as threats in our communities when we're talking about police community interaction.
This is my last question to you all. You know, feel free to take it at your own pace. When do you think the public will begin to trust law enforcement again, where that trust has been broken?
Jeez.
I'll take this one.
When I'm dead.
Yeah. So back in the late 80s, early 90s, the government, the feds, realized that we needed to insert officers in the communities. Not the police stations, not to build police stations in the community, but substations. And that funding was labeled the COPS program, Community Oriented Policing. Mm-hmm. That built a lot of public trust. I mean, when you had officers in a nondescript substation just assigned to the neighborhood, just to listen to problems, not do enforcement, but just wear soft clothes, be a part of the community, get to know everybody in the community. They felt comfortable with them. They felt like they had someone they can go to. They put a face to the agency, and they had our backs. But in 2008, when we entered this recession, the feds pulled the funding. So agencies had to curtail non-essential functions. So essentially, they had to stick to patrol, they had to stick to investigations, and the COPS program went out the wayside. So when we left the communities felt like we turned our backs on them. And when we turned our backs on them, essentially, they turned their backs on us. So if we want that support again, I think it's vital that we start bridging the gap. I think someone mentioned that before, by inserting officers right into the communities again. And that's unfortunately going to take some funding. So defunding is not going to help that cause.
No.
I think that it's going to be an uphill battle for a very long time. I think they're never going to get to this point because the media. I'm telling you guys, we can be doing great in the community. We can love the community. And then the media is going to highlight whatever's sexy. Let a white man kill a black man, and they're going to, especially during election time, they're going to push it out in the media, and it's going to cause everybody to hate us all over again. George Floyd shouldn't have been what it is. It shouldn't have been that way. We should have been railing the Minneapolis police officers that were involved in that, and it should have been done with. Instead, he has funerals. He got murals everywhere, and they got George Floyd laws. And I mean, it's the politicians in the media that's going to continue to cause us to have problem with the public.
And so for me, I think, one is, I think we have to reconcile that when it comes to how policing has been in this country, we really need sort of like a truth and reconciliation. We haven't had really a process. We've had a lot of situations and we've had momentary protests, and then we sort of moved on without reconciling the past and how we got here. Now with Mr. Floyd's murder, we have seen a very global, sustainable protest that is causing a lot of response at the legislative and political level, as well as from the public. But I think to Lee's point about when do we get to a point where the community finally has some trust in the police, I think you're only going to be able to get that when they really feel that there's real procedural justice and the other accountability mechanisms that exist to have oversight over the police departments. And I'm not talking about the police departments themselves, leadership, but I'm talking about the district attorney's office. I'm talking about civilian complaint review boards for cities that don't have them. And I'm talking about federal consent decrees. Federal consent decrees in them of themselves do not change a culture, right? They look at metrics, they measure different things. And at some point, years later, the department moves on from them. But it doesn't really change the culture. And I feel that the culture of departments are defined by the leaderships of the departments. So until we get to a place where if it's the federal government or state agencies are going to start holding the leaders of these departments just as culpable and accountable as the bad actors, we're not really going to get change. I'm hoping that what comes of this is a real level of accountability that the public can trust and have confidence in. It may not always get the outcome that they want, but they'll feel that the process was fair.
And that's to what you were saying, Joe. One of the things I wanted to say was also the public has to get to a point where they have to realize that everything that they see is not a crime. Everything that they think is police brutality is not. You know, a lot of times the media manipulates videos, the person manipulates videos. They can come and see me fighting a guy and me get the best of him. And they're like, and they hear people in the background going, oh, he's doing that for nothing. He's beating him for nothing, you know, and it gets disseminated without any filter. You know, there's no checks, there's no checks and balances because the average person now is a media outlet. You with your camera is a media outlet. You can post it to your page and it'll get seen by everybody in the world. And there's nobody to fact check it or anything. And then mainstream media gets a hold of it and they have to be first out with the story. Now it just shows me beating the heck out of a guy. So the general public they have to, and I'm not saying they're not, they're very intelligent, but they have to realize that just because you see it and it looks like a crime, it's not. And just because you want somebody to go to jail doesn't mean they are. You know, cops have to go through the same justice system that they do. So when you scream that you want justice for somebody, you got to realize that this officer, he's got the right to justice too. He's got the right to the same criminal justice protections that every other citizen has. Just because we put on a uniform doesn't mean we stop being a citizen. So I think once we also reconcile that, people will start to realize like, hey, this, but on the other hand, I don't think they will ever reconcile that because when you wear a uniform, you are representative of something that people really don't like, which is authority. So unfortunately, you know, we just have that stigma that's going to forever be attached to us. And this is exacerbated. So I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon.
I've always looked at it as I can only control what I can control. I just would encourage any young patrol out there. People are going to hate you, but you can control how you interact with them. Like you can get out there and love them back. I love the citizens. I cherish the citizens. On and off duty, I'm in the same neighborhoods as when I patrol as when I'm off. And I think that it just the grassroots. Each individual just show that we're not bad guys, but like live it and don't just say it. When adversity comes, love back because they're gonna hate you no matter what. Some people, but you're gonna win a lot if you just love back.
Wendy, David, anything?
Yeah, so I think that we might figure out how to build trust with communities when we figure out how to prevent these problems from happening again and again, these systemic failures. And I think there's an opportunity to learn from aviation. Aviation implemented a system a long time ago, and they were able to figure out when they had a failure in the system, how to identify it and prevent it throughout the system again. That's why flying an airplane is one of the safest forms of transportation. The medical field has adopted that system, and it's known as Sentinel event reviews. We could learn from other systems to figure out when we have failures, when we have poor outcomes or when we have near misses, how to prevent them from happening again by spreading those lessons throughout our entire system. And it's got to be done in kind of a global way.
Folks, I think that's all the time I've really got with you today. Unless there's anything else you guys want to leave, I thank you for being here. I thank you for being so forthcoming with, your experiences, so generous with your time. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your
Thank you.
And thank you all for your service, y'all.
Thank you. Be safe, everyone. Be safe.
Be safe.
Be safe.
Thanks,
Be
guys.
safe out there.